So you don't go to the SEALs first, though. What did you do at the beginning of your service?
Went to boot camp. After boot camp, went to A school, because I was a corpsman. Corpsman is like a Navy medic, and then from there I went to Naval Hospital Camp Pendleton.
Went to what?
Naval Hospital Camp Pendleton. So I was stationed at the hospital as a corpsman.
Oh, gotcha.
So I worked in, interestingly, I worked in a family practice clinic, which is crazy because my wife, when I met her, she was in residency as a family practice doctor. She's a family practice doctor now, but so I was working with residents, family practice resident doctors, and, checking in babies, doing vital signs, all that stuff. And when I got there, I told my LPO, which is the leading petty officer, like a supervisor, I said, hey, is there any way I could change my schedule so that I could train? Because I'm trying to be a SEAL. I'm trying to go to SEAL training. And she said, sure. So I worked for the morning clinic for 4 hours, and then I had 4 hours off in the afternoon to train, like whatever training I wanted to do. I had 4 hours, and then I would come back to the clinic and work 4 hours, the night clinic. So I'd work until essentially the clinic was shut down.
And how long were you doing that?
For a year.
For a year, and then you reapplied to the SEALs.
No, I reapplied. So I started training as soon as I got there, as soon as she gave me that 4 hour block. 6 months later, I qualified. So 6 months later,
right away.
So within that 6 months, I learned how to swim, good enough to pass the screener. I got my ASVAB. I had to retake the ASVAB. So
what's that?
ASVAB is like the SAT.
Okay.
So you got to score really high to get into special programs, whether it's BUDS or EOD. You can't be an idiot.
What goes into that test? Like math and reading, like an SAT, similar?
It's literally the a military version of SAT, but then they have like some mechanical, like comprehension stuff in there as well, and electrical stuff on there as well. But a lot of it is reading comprehension, math, algebra, all the stuff that you do in the SAT, because they want to kind of gauge your IQ to determine what job you get in the Navy, because they don't want somebody who's an idiot being a nuke working on a nuclear submarine. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that wouldn't make sense.
Yeah. In order that's the job in the Navy where you have pretty much the highest ASVAB score, or like near perfect ASVAB score, in order to qualify as a nuke. We call them nukes in the Navy because they work on the nuclear reactors on subs and ships. And so, and then like special programs kind of come after that. And so I retook the ASVAB, scored high enough to get into BUDS, and then I had packed on the weight, man. Went from not being able to do 1 pull-up to being able to do 30 pull-ups, not being able to do 10 push-ups or 20 push-ups to being able to do 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, and all the stuff that you have to do for the screener. And then went to BUDS. So I checked in January 2003 to Naval Hospital Camp Pendleton, qualified in July of 2003, and then was in BUDS in January 2004.
Quick.
Yeah, I put in the work.
And how long is BUDS again?
It's 6 months.
Right.
So it's 6 months. First 8 weeks. 8 weeks is first phase. So that's just like where they just hammer you, log PT, surf torture. I mean, it's just nonstop. They were trying to get guys to quit. And then in that 8 weeks, I think the third week is Hell Week. So Hell Week is where they keep you up for 6 days. Pretty much throw everything at you, make you do everything that you've been doing, but no sleep, and they keep you wet the whole time.
When did someone die in front of you?
That was like the week before Hell Week. So we were on a conditioning run. Yeah. We were on a conditioning run. It was brutal. The condition runs in soft sand. It's just a kick in the nuts, because you got to keep up, and if you don't keep up, then you get put in what's called the goon squad. So that means that like after the run, or maybe in between the run, if you're too far back, then you get hammered, like run to the surf, get wet, do push-ups, up and down the berm, boom, boom, boom. Like, and guys quit because they're just like, oh, this is run. Because now you got to run soaking wet and sandy, which makes it even worse. And so we were in the goon. We at the end of the conditioning run, getting hammered in the goon squad, and this dude's heart just gave out.
Oh.
Rob Vetter. So he was a SWIC guy. So he was
a SWIC guy?
So Navy has 2 special operations programs, SEALs and SWIC. So SWIC is I forgot what it stands for, but Special Warfare Combat Crewman.
Okay.
And so they essentially, I think they evolved out of the Vietnam War. So they're essentially transport. right?
Yeah, you got it right. Combat craft crewman.
Yep.
Got it.
So they're masters of the sea, and as it relates to insertion, extraction, they don't just work with SEALs. They work with other special operations groups that operate on the waters. So as it relates to like inserting them and extracting them and providing fire support, all that kind of stuff, because they got the big mini guns and on there, and they got all kinds of other tricked out guns, big guns on their cannons and stuff. And so yeah, he was a former SWIT guy, and heart gave out. And yeah, man, I remember that was the first funeral I went to in my entire life. Like we started trying to provide, me and like a couple other corpsmen tried to provide CPR on him, and then the Buds medic came up, and he continued. He was able to get a pulse, get him back, but he had been out for so long by the time they got him to the hospital that he was pretty much a vegetable. He was on life support. He was on life support for like a week, and then or like maybe 3 or 4 days, and then his wife decided, there's nothing. Doctor said there's nothing. There's no coming back. So they pulled the plug. And then that next week, that was the first funeral I ever went to in my entire life, was his funeral. Never been. I didn't even go to my grandmother's funeral. But so I'll never forget that. It was in his military chapel on base, on Naval Air Station base. And yeah, that was heavy. But that was the course. The course is brutal. And I almost died. As a matter of fact, the first time I went through Hell Week with my class, I started Hell Week with pneumonia in sight. I was spitting up blood, but I didn't want to tell the instructors because I didn't want to start day one of first phase. Because I mean,
they put you right back to the beginning.
Day one of first, because you go through 3 weeks of first phase, and then the 4th week is Hell Week. Like you lose like a chunk of people in those first 3 weeks because it's brutal. And then so I didn't want to I already made it to Hell Week, which is hard. I didn't want to now have to start day one, go on medical hold, and then start day one again. So I hid the injury. Yeah, man, about day and a half in, 2 days in, I started feeling even worse. My lungs were shredded wheat. Got to a point where we were doing Steel Pier, which is a evolution in Hell Week, where it's the coldest evolution in Hell Week. They lay you on a Steel Pier, make you jump in the bay, tread water. It's freezing cold. It's at night, like 2 a.m. Then you come out, take off your shirt, jump back in. So you do all that. And at that point, my core temperature was 88.7. Yeah. They drove me to Buds Medical. Went through the rewarming drill.
How does that work?
It's just a process because they can't rewarm you too fast.
Because it'll shock your body.
Yeah, and so they get they have like warming blankets and towels like in this heated thing, and so they gradually put more and more on you. And they did that. Finally, my core temperature got back up, and from there they were like, "Yo, if you want to go back to Buds, you want to quit?" And so I was like, "I'm not quitting." So I went back in, and as soon as I got there, they put me in the water. Surf torture. Then we had an evolution called base tour, where you got to run all around the base with the boat on your head. It's really brutal, and like all I remember is running and then waking up in the hospital. Yeah. So the guys reminded me, the guys who were in my boat crew told me, it's like, "Yo, dude, it was like somebody pulled a switch out of the computer. You went you were running and your whole body locked up and you went bam." And then when I finally came to and was at the hospital, I think I came to in the ambulance, and then they took me to Buds Medical, checked, they had an x-ray machine there, x-rayed my lungs. It was like, "Yo, this dude's lungs are done." I had pneumonia, site, and rhabdo.
I don't even know what that is.
Rhabdomyolysis, people die from that. It's where your muscle tissue breaks down.
Ooh.
Yeah, and in some cases, your body just starts eating itself, and like the proteins and stuff gets into I think it's your kidneys or something like that, and then that's what causes your kidneys to stop functioning well, and people have died from it. And so I was in the ICU for a few days, and then from there, finally got released, and then went back to Buds, and they was like, "Hey, good on you for not quitting, but you got to start day one over again."
Oh my God, they made you go all the way to the beginning because of that.
I had to, because it was medical. If I would have made it past Wednesday of Hell Week, then I would have not had to start over again.
Bitch.
So yeah, but the instructors were like, "Hey," they were apologetic. They were like, "Dude, we're super sorry. We didn't know that you were." They thought I was faking, because you get a lot of guys who, in their defense, you get a lot of guys who are not sick, but they don't want to quit. but they do want to quit.
Yes.
And so they, you know, they play games and they like, oh, they're limping and instructors and finally, you know, the instructors had enough and they'll performance drop them. So they were on the verge of performance dropping me because they thought I was faking.
Yeah.
And so after I got back to Buzz, they were like,
I understand that.
Yeah,
like, this is the highest level shit, you know?
Yeah. And when I got back, I remember the master chief of first phase and the senior chief came in. Well, the chief at the time came in and he was like, they were like, yo, we're sorry, but we're super happy you didn't quit. That's what we look for in a program, man. Dude that's gonna go and like until they're dead. And then going back to and then still go even after they're dead, right? And that I don't think I would have been able to do that if it wasn't for my upbringing, like we talked about earlier. Like that hardened me so much that even while being deathly sick and being screamed at by the instructors and told you're faking, like that didn't break me. Because if I would have quit and then went to medical, there's no coming back from that.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. Please hit that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.